It's Friday, everyone. What do we do on Fridays here at the Hint Hive? That's right, we smash the patriarchy. Hey ladies, welcome to the Hint Hive, Amplifying Women's Voices. I'm your queen bee of the hive, Kelly Hint, as well as your every Friday feminist life coach and psychotherapist. In today's episode, oh my gal pals, we are diving into something bold, something urgent, and something that might just light a fire in your chest that refuses to go out. At least I hope so anyway. We are talking about the No Kings protests happening across the United States and hopefully the world this Saturday, March 28th, 2026. And listen, this is not just about politics. I need you to hear me on that. This is about power. This is about autonomy. This is about saying loudly and unapologetically, no one gets to rule over our bodies, our voices, or our futures. So whether you've already committed to showing up, you're on the fence, or you're just trying to understand what is happening in the United States right now, this episode is your space. Because in this hive, we do not sit quietly while history is unfolding. We understand it, we feel it, and, when necessary, we rise. So let's start here. What are the No Kings protests? At their core, these are nationwide demonstrations rising in response to increasing fears around authoritarianism, government overreach, and the erosion of democratic protections. And that phrase, No Kings, is not random. It is deeply rooted in the very foundations of the United States. This country was literally born out of rebellion against monarchy, against the idea that one person should hold unchecked power over the people. The Boston Tea Party? Protest. The American Revolution? Protest turned into transformation. So, when people take to the streets today, in modern times, saying no kings, they are tapping into that same historical energy, the refusal to be ruled without consent. But here's the modern twist. This isn't just about rejecting a single figure. It's about rejecting systems that concentrate power, silence dissent, and threaten the rights of everyday people, especially women, marginalized communities, and those already fighting to be heard. This movement is a collective statement. We do not bow. We do not comply with injustice. And we will not be quiet while our rights are negotiated without us. Now let's zoom out, because I need you grounded in something really important. Protest is not new. And protest is not ineffective. In fact, protest is one of the most powerful tools that ordinary people like you and me have ever had. Let's talk receipts. The women's suffrage movement. Decades of organizing, marching, civil disobedience, arrests, hunger strikes, and relentless resistance led to the 19th Amendment. Women like Susan B. Anthony and Alice Paul were not just politely asking for rights. They were disrupting systems, getting jailed, refusing to eat in protest, and forcing the country to confront its own hypocrisy about democracy. It took over 70 years of sustained pressure, but that persistence is exactly what made the change inevitable. And, might I add, in my snarky way, these progressive movements paved the way for ignorant MAGA women to vote, to have a voice in supporting their corrupt leader of today. These MAGA ladies just despise feminists such as myself, but yet they benefit off the fruits of the labor of women just like me. Just saying. And then how about the civil rights movement? Boycotts, marches, sit-ins, freedom rides, and mass organizing. All of these things help dismantle legalized segregation. This wasn't just symbolic action. It was strategic, sustained disruption. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted over a year, costing the transit system financially and forcing change. Sit-ins across the South challenged segregation in public spaces, often at great personal risk. Protesters were harassed, arrested, and attacked, yet they kept showing up. And because they did, the nation was forced to confront the brutality, the brutal reality of racism, leading to landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This is what protest does. It makes injustice impossible to ignore. Labor movements. They gave us weekends, minimum wage laws, and safer working conditions. And they did it through strikes, walkouts, union organizing, and massive collective risk. In the early 20th century, workers, many of them women and immigrants, were laboring 10 to 16-hour days in dangerous conditions. Events like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire exposed horrific workplace safety failures, killing 146 workers and igniting public outrage. From there, organized labor pushed relentlessly. Strikes shut down industries, unions negotiated protections, and public pressure forced lawmakers to act. The idea of a 40-hour work week, overtime pay, and basic safety standards did not come from generosity at the top. No, they came from people at the bottom refusing to accept exploitation as normal. That's the through line. When people organize and disrupt, systems are forced to change. Anti-war protests during Vietnam shifted public opinion and increased pressure on policymakers. Massive demonstrations, teach-ins, draft resistance, and public figures speaking out all contributed to a growing cultural and political shift. As images of the war and the voices of protesters became more visible across media, public support for the war declined significantly, and elected officials were forced to respond to increasing public pressure. These protests didn't immediately end the war, but they played a critical role in changing the national conversation. They played a role in influencing elections and ultimately contributing to policy decisions to de-escalate and withdraw U.S. involvement. It is a powerful reminder that protest works by shifting both the emotional climate and the political reality, often over time, through sustained collective action. None of that happened because people stayed quiet and waited politely. It happened because people disrupted the status quo. And here's the data piece, because I love bringing in the facts. Political scientists Erica Chenoweth and Maria J. Steffen studied hundreds of movements across decades and found that nonviolent protests are about twice as likely to succeed as violent ones. Twice. Why? Because nonviolent movements attract more participants, create broader public sympathy, build sustainable momentum, and make repression more visible and less justifiable. In other words, when people come together in visible, collective resistance, it shifts culture. And when culture shifts, policy eventually follows. Let's bring in my therapist perspective, because this is where it gets really powerful. Protesting is not just political, it is deeply psychological. When people feel powerless, anxious, or overwhelmed by what's happening in the world, one of the most damaging responses is inaction, is doing nothing, is crawling inside of yourself. Because inaction feeds helplessness. It reinforces the belief that nothing you do matters. But action, even small, even the tiniest bit of action, interrupts that cycle. Protesting can reduce feelings of isolation. It reminds you that you are not alone. Protesting can increase your sense of control and agency. It can strengthen your identity and values. And it can create connection and belonging with others who care. And I want to be very clear about something. You do not have to be fearless to show up. You just have to be willing. For women especially, who have been socialized for generations to be agreeable, quiet, accommodating, and non-disruptive, protesting is a radical act of psychological liberation. It is reclaiming your voice in a world that has historically tried to soften and even silence it. Now let's go even deeper. Because movements like this, they do not impact everyone equally. When democratic protections weaken, when power becomes more concentrated, women are often among the first to feel it. We're talking about reproductive rights, access to health care, economic security and workplace violations, economic security and workplace protections, and legal protections against violence and discrimination. And history backs this up. When systems become more authoritarian, the rights of marginalized groups are often the first to be restricted. So, when women show up to protest, it is not just civic participation. It is self-protection. It is boundary setting at a societal level. It is saying, you do not get to decide my life without my voice being part of the conversation. And let's be real. Women have always been at the forefront of movements for change. We organize. We mobilize. We sustain movements. So, if you are feeling that pull right now, that urge to be part of something bigger, that is not random. That is your intuition recognizing a moment that matters. Ladies, please trust your intuition. I know it's been beaten out of us for centuries, but if there was ever a time, the time is now. Trust your gut. All right, let's get practical, because empowerment without action, that's just a vibe, and we are about real-world impact in this hive. So, if you're planning to attend a No Kings protest, here's how to do it in a way that is safe, grounded, and effective. Step number 1, know your rights. You have the constitutional right to peaceful assembly under the First Amendment. Familiarize yourself with local guidelines so that you know what's allowed and what to do if those rights are challenged. Step number 2, go with a group. Do not underestimate the power of community. Bring friends. Coordinate with others. Stay connected. There is both physical and emotional safety in numbers. If you don't have a group to go with, check your local indivisible groups by doing a Google search. There are groups that call themselves, for example, my local one is called Genesee Valley Indivisible. Just do a Google search. Search up local No Kings protests. They're all over the interwebs. Connect with other resistors through Facebook groups and make a plan. The We Are Mayday group on Facebook that I've discussed previously is filled with people from all over the world who are organizing and making supportive connections. Step number 3, prepare essentials. Think of this like preparing your nervous system as much as your body. Gather water, snacks, portable phone chargers, comfy shoes, weather-appropriate clothing, and, if you want to go a step further, write down important phone numbers just in case your phone dies and you don't have a backup. And if you're worried about your personal safety, stay aware of the vibe of the crowd. Do not place yourself in areas of high risk. If you don't want to get pepper sprayed by law enforcement, you have got to remain vigilant of your surroundings. Some of this is unnecessary in some of the more rural, smaller protests, but the risk increases as you get into the cities that typically have very large crowd sizes. Or if you are one of the badasses who want to be on the front lines and be very vocal, please do it assertively but peacefully. For crying out loud, don't try to get pepper sprayed, okay? Step number 4, have a plan. Know where you're going. Know your exit routes. Know how you're getting home. And then let loved ones know of your plan if possible, if they're not coming with you. This reduces anxiety and it helps to keep you grounded. Step number 5, protect your energy. You are not required to engage with hostility, arguments, or provocation. Your presence is powerful enough. You do not need to prove your worth by debating anyone in the street. Remember, protests that are peaceful are twice as effective, and we need these protests to be effective. So, do your part, please. Step number 6, regulate your nervous system. Take breaks, breathe deeply, check in with your body. You are allowed to step back if it becomes overwhelming. And finally, step 7, amplify beyond the street. Not everyone can attend, and that is valid. I myself struggle significantly in certain conditions due to my disability, so I have to choose protest locations wisely. Sometimes I can't even attend, but you can bet your sweet ass that I am active behind the scenes. Hell, I risk my own freedoms in this country every single time I put out an episode that does not lick the boots of this current regime. Kind of like this episode. So, remember, we all have our place in the resistance and we do not have to occupy every lane. You can still contribute by sharing accurate, fact-based information, by donating to organizations doing the work, by calling or emailing your representatives, and by having conversations in your community. Change is not one action. It is a series of actions, and we all have a place. All right, before I start wrapping up, let's have an honest moment. Let's talk fear, because it is real. Showing up can feel scary. There's fear of confrontation, fear of judgment, fear of being seen, fear of consequences. And I want to say this clearly As both your feminist coach and a therapist, as well as your queen bee of this hive, fear does not mean stop. Fear often means this matters. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that something else matters more. And right now, your voice matters more. Your rights matter more. Your future matters more. All right, Hive, it's time for your badass affirmation of the week. And I want you to feel this in your chest, in your spine, in your entire body when you say it. I do not shrink in the presence of power. I rise to meet it. Again, my badass queens. I do not shrink in the presence of power. I rise to meet it. This affirmation is not just words. It is a reclamation, because so many systems have been built on the assumption that women will shrink, that we will stay quiet, that we will make ourselves smaller to keep others comfortable. In this moment, the No Kings protests, they challenge that narrative. They say, rise anyway, speak anyway, show up anyway. Ladies, every time that you refuse to shrink, you disrupt generations of conditioning. And that disruption, that is where change begins. So here's what I want you to carry with you after this episode. History does not change because people stay comfortable. It changes because people decide that they are no longer willing to tolerate what harms them. And they decide that together. The No Kings protests are one moment, but moments like this build movements. They create momentum. They strengthen community. They remind people of their collective power. And whether you are physically in the streets, using your voice online, or making quiet, intentional choices to resist systems that harm you, you are part of this story. You are not powerless. You never were. My friends, if this episode lit something up in you, do not ignore it. Trust that intuition, like I said earlier. Share this episode with another woman who needs to hear it. Start a conversation. Post about it. Invite someone to attend a protest with you. And if you do show up to a protest this week, girl, I want to hear from you. Tag me, message me, post about it in our podcast Facebook group. Tell me what it felt like to stand in your power. Share your experiences with other like-minded women who will appreciate you for your efforts far more than MAGA Margaret ever will. Because this hive, we do not just talk about empowerment. We embody it. We live it. And we rise together. Now, get out there and amplify your collective voices, my precious badass queens. Until next time, keep amplifying your voice.